Hello and welcome to a very special prediction show from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm joined by Charlie, and for the second day in succession, we're talking about cup finals in the UK. This time, the Scottish Cup final, which is between St Johnstone and Hibernian. So, St Johnstone looking to make it a cup domestic double this season, which would be a fantastic season for them. And Hibernian, after finishing third in the league, looking to put a little bit of an icing on the cake for their season. So we're going to talk a little bit about the two sides, how they got to the final. We'll talk about their semi-final matches and what we expect from the game. So Charlie, let's start with Hibernian on this occasion because St Johnstone have already won a cup final this year. So Hibs, they probably of the two sides had the more comfortable passage in the semi-final. Goals either side of half-time, albeit the second was offside. We'll ignore that for now. But they had the better of the stats. They were comfortably through, and I think it's fair to say they were deservedly taking their place in the final based on that performance.
Yeah, definitely. I think they've got a very potent front four as well. You know, Jackson Irvine, Martin Boyle. I always get the fullback and Christian Doige because you've got the left back who's Doig as well, and he all gets confused. Christian Doige and obviously Kevin Nisbet. And I think my slight caveat with Hibs is that front four is great, but it's very rigid. It's a 4-4-2. You know, it's two banks of four and sort of go from there. When they're on, like Jackson Irvine in that semi-final was unplayable, to be brutally honest. If you can get the ball into his feet, I think they're great. I just think that they're probably not the most mobile in terms of being up front, in terms of the ball going in behind. So it has to go through the centre forwards. And I think they're very good at that. And I think we'll talk about St Johnstone in a minute. It might play into their hands a little bit more. They do score a lot more goals than St Johnstone. I think this will be a different kind of cup final. Normally you want the big barnstorming sort of 4-3 or something like that. Can't quite see that because you're talking about a very rigid Hibernian against a very defensive St Johnstone. So I'm not saying it's going to be a naff game, but I just don't see there being lots and lots of goals. But if there's going to be goals coming from anywhere, it will be from those front four of Hibs, who pretty much chipped in across all four of them across the whole season. Martin Boyle, I think he's leading their assist table as well. So it just shows you sort of that it's coming from different areas of the pitch, not relying on that one man.
But equally for Hibs, we've got to talk about the defensive side. You mentioned youngsters like Josh Doig at left back, but they're also very solid defensively. They concede less than one a game in the league. They've been fairly astute defensively in the cup run.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, even in terms of when they, recently picked up a draw against Celtic 0-0. I know whatever you want to say about Celtic in a minute, but it's still a fantastic side, whichever way you look at it. So they obviously value clean sheets, etc. in that sense. But for me, I think that when you've got that good, strong foundation, we talk about this with a lot of teams, and then a front four that can really hurt teams, I think you've got a good combination there. The only thing I would say, and we'll go on about it in a minute, is in the last 6 games, they did lose to St Johnstone 1-0 in the league. I think their defence is probably stronger than St Johnstone's. We will get onto that. But I just think when you've got that combination of then when you've got that out ball to those front four, you have got a good foundation to work from there. So clean sheets is something they value, and I think that's something they'll probably try and play for, obviously, in the final.
Absolutely. And you've led to the point I was going to mention, which is these two sides played 3 weeks ago, and it will go back to a key man in the St Johnstone team that we're going to mention in a moment in Glenn Middleton. But they did lose 1-0 at Easter Road. And I worry what sort of mental impact that's going to have. Do you think it will have any, or is it the traditional, it's out the way for the cup final?
I don't know. I don't think they'd have taken their foot off because you obviously they're vying for third place. And we mentioned, even when we talked about the Irish League prediction we did yesterday, taking out the whole Old Firm. And I wanted to really quickly say this. It's fantastic to see a final without the Old Firm in there. And I mean that in the politest way possible, but it's just great to see other teams. But also the money for teams. I know that obviously the Scottish League is a lot more professional, but still outside of those big two, those European places, the money you get from that is fantastic. So for me, I don't think, finishing third is a huge deal in Scotland. It's almost as good as winning the league if you're not one of the other two. So for me, I don't think they were taking the foot off the gas. And I'm obviously not going to do that this weekend. So for me, on that basis, yes, it's going to worry me. If they'd have put out a reserve side and that had happened, completely get that and be like, right, okay, that was just a second string. But if you look at the squad, it pretty much was their first team. So on that basis, it's going to hurt. It's definitely going to be something in the back of your mind. And particularly the longer that game goes on, you just worry about that sucker punch and find yourself in a similar position of losing 1-0. So I think it's going to take a lot from Jack Ross to really motivate those players and almost clear that out of your mind. We've played, football at all different levels, and it definitely sticks with you. So it takes some good man management skills to get that out of the way.
And the final Hibs question before we move on to their opponents is they have got a pretty young side. It's something Hibs have been famous for over many, many, many years. And they're managed by Jack Ross, who down south in England didn't have the greatest experience in a final last time. Are moving up north now. Do you think that's going to have an impact? Do you think he's the right man to lead a young squad in a final? And how do you think he's going to do? Do you think that he's going to be able to get the best out of the Hibs side on the day?
Well, I think the fact that he's done well in the league would be testament to the job he's done. He's been given the whole season, and look what he's achieved, the cup final and third place. And as I say, that's a huge achievement for any club outside of the Old Firm to be finishing in third place. So for me, the pitch, what's happened on the pitch speaks to the quality that he's done. And like you say, I think if you can get results out of a young side, surely that only breeds confidence for going into the future. So maybe I don't want to speak on other people's behalf, but if you have a bit of a dodgy experience at a different job, I'm just taking outside of football for a second, it does make you value your next job. I think it does make you then appreciate that, and you probably work a little bit harder and you go that extra yard and do that a little bit more. So that clearly seems to be paying off here. So for me, yeah, 100% he's the right man to be taking him into this.
And let's move on to the opponent, St Johnstone. Now, I know the result wasn't quite so clear cut on the day against St Mirren, the 2-1 win in the semi final. But I mean, I got to watch this game in full, and I thought St Johnstone, for the most part, were fantastic. Albeit, after dominating the game, it took the substitution of Glenn Middleton coming on to change the game with an assist and a goal. And my word, they were a good assist and a goal. But is it perhaps a little bit of a worry that despite an excellent performance and 22 shots, they're hitting the target only a quarter of the time and didn't really look like scoring that often before Glenn Middleton came on?
No, I completely agree. To be honest, if you look at the stats across the season, St Johnstone are one of the lowest scorers. I mean, they barely average a goal a game. There's two ways of looking at it. It's good that you've got the depth that you can bring on a Glenn Middleton to change the game, and I suppose it does give you that option and that plan B if plan A isn't working. I like Callum Davidson as a manager. I liked him as a player, to be brutally honest, in that sense. But I think playing 3-5-2, it's quite a defensive 3-5-2. There's not really that, you haven't got that one in the whole, like, even Wotherspoon, for example, he's not really going to go bombing forward. You are isolating your front two a bit. However, as you probably saw against St Mirren, if you want a quick counter attack, then St Johnstone, we mentioned it yesterday in a different one, St Johnstone are a team for you in that sense. I just worry a little bit about the fact that they're not going to have a lot of the ball. I think that's fair to say. Hibs will dominate possession. It's how long you can keep that going. They obviously did it a few weeks ago, but how long you can, in the height of a cup final, in the adrenaline and all of that, how you're not going to break that line. You get that overzealous centre half or full wing back who goes flying out of that line, leaves a hole, and that's when Hibs will hit you hard.
Yeah, and I think one of the things with the St Johnstone side rather than Hibs, there is a lot more of a mix of experience and youth, which is something that Callum Davidson's done really well. We'll talk about him in a minute, his first season of management. But if I take centre midfield, for example, Ali McCann and Craig Bryson, it's the perfect sort of yin and yang partnership, as you would go for. So is that something that's going to be important to them? They've got an experienced keeper. They've got a good bit of balance in the side. And as you say, the youth on the counter-attack and the experience and discipline, that's always a good combination. And it actually proved so at Easter Road a few weeks ago, didn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's just that discipline. I think that's what you need in those older heads and those experienced players. When you're playing that kind of formation and you're playing that style of football, for me, it's probably a perfect blend, but you have got to rely on a lot of discipline and a lot of grinding out until that opportunity presents itself to possibly hit him on the counter.
Absolutely. And I guess we've talked a little bit about Callum Davidson in the last 2 points, but for a first season in management, this is turning into one hell of a season for him. A top half finish, which is an excellent achievement. The 5th place, if the cup had gone against them, would still result in Europa Conference qualifying for the new competition next year. And the fact that he could end up winning more trophies than any other team or manager in Scotland this year, considering the old firm are there, is a remarkable achievement in itself.
Oh, incredible. And we mentioned about earlier, in terms of the budgets that he's had to work under. And I think it's some very good recruitment from him in the sense over last summer as well. I think your first job, you're always quite hungry. And I know it sounds, I want to take a step out of the tactical side of it. You do just wonder, it's a horrible old cliche, but is your name on it? You get that with a bit of enthusiasm, a bit of motivation with you. I think he seems like he can inspire a mix of good young players and experienced players. And I think that's the hardest one. You can get the young players in there. I think that's always quite easy to get them on board, particularly when you're talking about professional football. But trying to get the best out of those older heads, it's not an easy task, and I think he's done that very well. So I'm going to prediction in a minute. There's a very much a confidence in my head and my heart here of what I think is going to happen. But he's done a fantastic job, and potentially 2 domestic cups in any league is a massive effort. Given the way the Scottish League possibly works, you could argue that's even bigger than a lot of other places. So yeah,
absolutely. And I guess the final thing on St Johnstone is we talk about the manager, we talk about the mix of youth and experience in the team, but equally, they are the side that on paper you would expect to be underdogs for this game. Now, that can work 2 ways in a cup final. We've seen it in the English FA Cup final, of course, in recent weeks. And you've got a team who haven't scored as many and have conceded more. On paper, everyone should be expecting Hibs to win if you take aside the fact that St Johnstone are a cup team. So what do you see happening from a St Johnstone point of view? Do you think they can produce their best on the day? Or do you think that if Hibs play their best, they're going to be able to win it?
I'm going for experience over youth here in that sense, and I just think the longer that game goes on, the longer that Hibs might probe away, not get anything, start to get a bit exasperated, you start to get a bit overzealous, you maybe push up a little bit higher, you start to pull the fullback on a bit more, stuff like that. And that's, I think, when St Johnstone strike and they've got that quick counter-attack, particularly with the formation and that overload in the centre of the midfield. I assume both teams will line up as they have done previously, 4-4-2 and 3-5-2. On that counter, that extra man in midfield is huge. It's dynamite in there. So my head on like you say, on the form table should go Hibs, but I just think their name might be on it. And if they can be stout and resilient for the first half, first hour, I honestly think they'll nick one later on. So I don't think, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think it's going to be goals galore in this, because St Johnstone are not, haven't been prolific in front of goal, and I think they're going to set up quite defensively, not allowing many chances for Hibs. So on that basis, I genuinely think they might sneak one late on. So I'm going to have to go for a dogged 1-0 win on the counter. I just can't. I honestly believe their name's on it this year. And with, as I said, I've mentioned, that counter attack, Hibs will get overexcited and bosh 1-0. And that's where the experience comes over that youth of Hibs, in my opinion.
Well, there is a worrying signing that we're both in agreement in the style of games we're going to see this weekend in the two cup finals. And the problem, I guess, in Scotland here is that we're both predicting maybe a slightly more difficult game to watch. Obviously, it is live on free TV at the weekend, but I'm going to go for 0-0. And we're going all the way to penalties. There is no excitement here. I'm sure the goals will fly in once we get to the penalty kicks. But I'm kind of in agreement with you. I just think St Johnstone's name's on it. And there's something to be said about the big game mentality. And St Johnstone have been known as a bit of a cup team for a few years. But the way they played in the League Cup, the way they played in the semi-final, I can just see them sneaking through and winning it on penalties. I think the crucial thing, like you say, is holding out, keeping it 0-0 in the first half, making sure that they don't get drawn into Hibs' game and turn it into a bit of an end-to-end match. Because they did that for a small part against St Mirren. And as you mentioned, St Mirren had a couple of glorious chances to get into that game. And they managed to survive it. But against Hibs, I would imagine Kevin Nisbet and Martin Boyle, maybe even a Jackson Irving, they would take those chances if they came. So that's the crucial bit for St Johnstone. But I think we're both in agreement. We're going for a St Johnstone win in very slightly different fashions. It's not important what we think. It matters what the Hibernian and St Johnstone fans think. So let us know down in the comments what you think for the final, whether you're looking forward to watching it, who you think's going to win, and whether you think it'll be an entertaining game. It is a shame, of course, that after the debacle about fans, it is going to be behind closed doors now. But fingers crossed that won't take away too much from the occasion. If you did enjoy what you see, please do chuck a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe down below for regular content from the podcast. Thank you to Charlie for joining us as always. You can follow us on Twitter at HonestFootball3. And hopefully we'll see you next time.